amount of destruction caused by the war on Iran, as we well know, is massive. But you were personally on the ground in the country for 11 days during the U.S.-Israeli bombing campaign. What can you tell us about your experience there?
I left a week ago, I can only give you my impressions. They're valid as of March 31st when I left the country. And I went to 7 cities, all the way from Tabriz in the north down to the Strait of Hormuz and the city of Minab, where the American military massacred 168 students. My impression, Rachel, is that the country is not by any means destroyed. 99% of the infrastructure remains intact. I can't comment on damage sustained by military facilities because I didn't see any military facilities. But the civilian infrastructure, although there has been clearly a reign of terror and tens of billions of dollars of damage have been done, this is a very big country. The population is widely dispersed, and 99% of the infrastructure is intact. The electricity was functioning, the water was working, there was plenty of food in the grocery stores, in the stalls, in the markets. So the subway system was still working, the bus, the train system. So any idea that this country is devastated and lies in smoking ruins was not at all borne out by my experience.
You said you visited Minab. That's where the nearly 170 people, mostly children, were killed in a U.S.-Israeli strike on day 1 of this war. It was a local school that was bombed. Can you tell us about what residents are saying about the tragedy, and what are your thoughts on it and what you saw there?
I first stopped with my colleagues in the cemetery where most of the victims are buried, and we spoke to family members of the victims there. It was heart-wrenching to speak to them and to see them. Mothers were camped out who had lost children and were there saying they wanted to keep their children feeling safe, spiritually speaking. We saw a man who was just devastated, sitting over the grave of his son, spreading rose petals. We spoke to 2 men who held the blood-soaked clothing of their children, and they were absolutely adamant that they had nothing to do with the Iranian military, that this facility had nothing to do with the Iranian military, and they believe that their children were intentionally murdered by the Americans. Now, when we got to the site, we were given complete free rein. It was a former military camp. People openly admitted this, and it was obvious because when you walked around the outside, all you could see was a 12-foot concrete wall with barbed wire on top, and there was a military-style checkpoint at the entrance. But once you went inside, and as I say, I was given free rein, and I inspected every building. What I found was 0 evidence at all that this had any military function. One of the buildings that were destroyed, we were told, housed pharmaceutical products. We found plenty of pharmaceutical products in the rubble. The school itself, it's quite obvious that the schoolyard was a schoolyard. Anybody with any kind of intelligence gathering capability would have known this. If they can find the supreme leader, they could have figured out that that was a schoolyard. And walking around the facility on the exterior, I saw nothing in the distance that could possibly be, based on to the naked eye, a military facility. So I believe that this was intentional, Rachel. Remember, this was more than 1 Tomahawk. There were 3, they believe, because there were 3 or 4 separate buildings that were destroyed. So there were obviously multiple missiles. And I can't believe that the American military didn't know, with its impressive intelligence gathering capabilities, what this was. I think they were sending a message to the Iranian people that if you do not capitulate, we are going to murder your children.
Yeah, there's still so many questions surrounding that bombing. Dimitri, you said that Iran is far from destroyed, the country itself, from the war. But you were also in Lebanon while it was being bombed. How does it compare, the scale of destruction, what you saw in Lebanon compared to Iran?
Lebanon is far worse. I mean, in the south of Lebanon, for example, Kfar Kila, I was there in February of 2025. So a little more than a year ago. I imagine that it's even worse now than it was then. And when I was there, this was a village of some 5,000 people before this genocidal war, and there were almost no buildings standing, almost none. People were, people who were supporters of Hezbollah, because this was a predominantly Shia community. They were very supportive of Hezbollah, had planted the Hezbollah flag on the ruins of their homes. But they were having great difficulty rebuilding because anybody who tried to rebuild was potentially going to be killed by an Israeli drone strike. And I saw this in other villages as well. So, by the way, this shouldn't surprise anybody. Iran has significant air defenses. Lebanon doesn't. Lebanon is right next to Israel. It is subject not only to aerial attack, but to ground incursions, constant ground incursions. The war on Lebanon began at a point in time when Israel had far more munitions available than it currently has. Its munitions have been greatly depleted, as have those of the United States. So you would only expect, rationally speaking, that Lebanon would have suffered far greater damage, and it has.
With the announcement of the ceasefire, Donald Trump claimed the U.S. achieved all of its military goals in Iran. Is that accurate? What goals did the U.S. achieve during this war?
Well, because this is a serious news program, I'm not going to guffaw and laugh, Rachel, but what are, first of all, the military objectives of the United States? But let's go through the possible list of what they might be. The recovery of the enriched uranium. Nope. Iran still has the enriched uranium. The destruction of Iran's ballistic missile program. Nope. Iran, according to Israel itself, is still firing ballistic missiles. The overthrow of the Islamic Republic. That didn't work out either. The Islamic Republic is still in place. And in fact, they still have the same president and foreign minister as they did at the beginning of the war, who are, by all intents and purposes, they've become hardliners in many ways. I can't imagine, and of course, I omitted to mention what is, economically speaking, the most important military objective, and that is securing the opening of the Strait of Hormuz. And it's clear that there is no military solution to the Strait of Hormuz. The only way to open it is for the American government to make concessions to Iran that are sufficient to persuade them to open it themselves. Otherwise, it will remain closed. So there's no military objective that has been achieved. And in fact, the United States is worse off militarily than it was before because its bases in the Persian Gulf have been utterly squashed, and many of them have been largely evacuated. And it's been shown that they are effectively indefensible. So I think that this man, by saying that he's achieved his military objectives, is only reinforcing the degree to which he lives in an alternate reality.
Yeah, and the president even had said that the goal was to free the Iranian people. Just a day ago, Trump said the Iranian people, in fact, want to hear bombs because, quote, they want to be free. I mean, I've never lived in a war zone. I've never even been to a war zone. But I can't imagine people hearing the sound of bombs would be thinking of freedom. Considering the widespread destruction that these people have endured and what you saw, what are your thoughts on that statement from Trump?
I specifically put that question to people over and over again, all over the country. Donald Trump says that he and Netanyahu are trying to liberate you. How do you respond to that claim? The response was universally one of derision and contempt. People couldn't believe that anyone would even take it seriously. There was nothing but hostility being expressed all over the country, even by people who were not necessarily supporters of the Iranian government, to the United States and Israel. And frankly, it's really racist. It's just fundamentally racist to suggest that people would want their country to be bombed. I mean, they're not savages. This is an ancient civilization, a very sophisticated society that has survived every manner of calamity over millennia. And the idea that these people would want an external aggressor, particularly one that is genocidal in nature, like the United States and Israel, to bomb their country is, frankly, it's just racist.
We have heard a number of contradictory statements from the U.S. president. Just a day ago, he posted that he wanted to raise Iran's whole civilization to the ground and then turned right around, and now he's ready for a ceasefire. I mean, what does that say to you about the U.S. strategic planning in the Middle East?
Planning, I don't think, is part of the lexicon of the Trump regime. But look, whatever happens from here on in, and personally, I am, as I'm sure many of your viewers are, deeply skeptical that the United States is going to agree to these 10 points or even half of these 10 points, at least in the near term. Let me be clear. I've been saying it every time I get an opportunity to say it. Eventually, the United States government is going to have to pay the piper because it needs the Strait of Hormuz to be opened. The American people will not tolerate it remaining closed for very long because they'll suffer very significant economic consequences. So they're going to have to make serious concessions. But whether they'll do that, whether they're ready to do that, is another question altogether. And they may well be lying. Donald Trump may be pulling another fast one. But let us be absolutely clear. He has blinked. He said he was going to destroy Iran last night. And we wake up in the morning and find out that he hasn't even attempted to destroy Iran. Not that he could, but he hasn't even attempted. And the Strait of Hormuz is still closed. And
Yeah.
in addition, according to the Israelis, they're still firing ballistic missiles, the Iranians. So it is absolutely clear that Donald Trump caved in last night, whatever happens to this negotiation.
A lot of people are grateful that he caved in, though. So the ceasefire for 2 weeks, I mean, on one hand, 2 weeks is a long time, but on the other hand, it isn't really a long time. What do you think is going to happen during this ceasefire? Do you think we'll see markets rebound, as I'm sure Trump hopes, or something else?
Well, as long as the shooting stops and there's an increase, a material increase in the maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, I think we will see a modest rebound, but we're going to probably see a continuation of the volatility. But I just have to highlight this, Rachel. It's quite important for people to understand. This deal, this 10-point deal, is an absolute catastrophe for Israel. First and foremost for Israel. Why? Because under this deal, U.S. forces would have to withdraw from the region. The only reason why Israel gets away with what it gets away with is because of the presence of the U.S. forces in the region. Israel would be, extraordinarily vulnerable to the people whom it has incensed with its savagery were the U.S. forces to withdraw from the region. So that's number one. Number two, the lifting of all sanctions on Iran. And the freezing of its assets. This is going to result in the Iranian state becoming much better off economically and having far greater capacity to develop its military and intelligence capabilities. So the Israelis absolutely hate that provision. And cessation of all hostilities to all elements of the axis of resistance, one of which is the Palestinian resistance groups. That in and of itself is a non-starter for Israel. So Israel is going to do everything it can to tank this deal. This is a matter of life and death for the state of Israel in its current form, and they have no interest in adopting any kind of a democratic form of government in Israel. And so the question ultimately is going to be this, Rachel: is Donald Trump ready to condition U.S. military aid to Israel on its compliance with this agreement, whatever it turns out to be? He may be. It's possible. Because you see people like Joe Kent and Tucker Carlson saying that the Israelis are exploiting.
Yeah, to your point about Israel not wanting this deal to succeed, the IDF does confirm that it did complete a wave of strikes in Iran overnight. Is that likely to affect the negotiating process? How is Iran going to view continued strikes from Israel during this ceasefire?
I don't think they'll negotiate at all if they're being struck. I think it's going to have to be crystal clear to the Iranians that there has been a cessation of the hostilities. And I don't think they're going to open the Strait of Hormuz either until there has been a complete cessation for a significant period of time of the attacks on Iran. The war will just continue if Israel keeps firing. I think the Iranians have learned the lesson. They saw what happened to the Lebanon ceasefire. November 2024, Israel continued to attack Lebanon every single day. They have no interest in going down that path.
Netanyahu's office says it supports Washington's decision to halt the active phase of the war, but it was not directly involved in the agreement. Do you believe that all? I mean, considering that Israel and the U.S. Started this war alongside each other.
No, I don't believe that for one second, because I think it's Israel has a powerful incentive to have Donald Trump say that to the world, because it doesn't want to be associated with what is obviously a catastrophic defeat. I mean, even if half of these points are accepted, it would be absolutely unprecedented, after starting this war, this illegal war of aggression, for the United States to pay reparations. When has that happened in our lifetime? The United States to withdraw military bases from this strategically important region. Even the fact that Donald Trump is saying that this is a workable basis for a negotiation, and even if he's lying about that, this is humiliating and unprecedented for the United States government, and Israel wants nothing to do with it publicly. But I think privately, I find it unbelievable that there weren't extensive consultations between the governments of Israel and the United States over this agreement or this ceasefire proposal.
All right, we're going to leave it there. That's lawyer, journalist, and host of the Reason to Resist YouTube channel, Dimitri Lascaris. Dimitri, thank you.
Thank you.